A Christmas Carol. Scrooge and Marley were excellent business partners in London for many years. After Marley's death, Scrooge went on alone, with both names on his office door, indifferent to whether he was called Scrooge or Marley. All he cared about was business and money. It was Christmas season again and snow was falling. The town was full of festive decorations and the streets were filled with the sound of carols. A group of little boys approached the window, begging for food. Children ran and played happily. Scrooge was a hard, cunning, and miserly old man, with no warmth or openness about him. He led a reclusive, lonely existence, uninterested in others. Scrooge was never accosted in the street with a cheerful greeting, nor was his company ever desired. On the frosty Christmas Eve, Scrooge was hard at work in his office, leaving his office door open to keep an eye on his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who worked in a dim, chilly little room adjoining Scrooge's office, and had to keep warm by a burning candle. Scrooge's nephew Fred warmly invited him to Christmas dinner, but Scrooge refused. Later, 2 gentlemen came to ask for donations for the poor. Scrooge also ruthlessly rejected their request, saying that the poor should go to prisons and workhouses. Before leaving the office, Bob asked for Christmas Day off, which Scrooge reluctantly granted, but scolded him for being paid for not working, and told him to come early the next morning. Bob cheerfully ran home to his family as fast as he could. While the world around him buzzed with festive preparations, Scrooge remained isolated and cold, untouched by the spirit of Christmas. His lodgings had once belonged to his dead partner, Jacob, in a desolate, obscure building on an isolated side street. Scrooge groped his way along the dark streets until he reached his front door. To his astonishment, the knocker had turned into the face of Jacob Marley, a name he hadn't thought of in 7 years. Marley's ghostly face frightened Scrooge. Scrooge entered to inspect his rooms for intruders, before retiring to his bedroom for a solitary dinner. He soon noticed a bell at the other end of the room, which began to ring of its own accord, and was soon joined by all the bells in the house. The ringing ceased and a strange sound came from below, like the dragging of a chain, slowly approaching Scrooge's bedroom door. As the ghost passed effortlessly through the locked door, Scrooge grew pale and trembling. It was Marley's ghost. Asked the purpose of his visit, Marley revealed that he had suffered the pain of wandering aimlessly after death, weighed down by the chains forged in life. He warned Scrooge that 3 spirits were coming to offer him a chance of salvation. The first ghost, the ghost of Christmas past, appeared at 1:00 midnight and took Scrooge on a journey to revisit his own past. They arrived in a village, Scrooge's birthplace, where he recognized scenes from his childhood and met young schoolmates. Next, they visited Scrooge as a lonely boy in a schoolroom. Scrooge felt a deep pity for his younger self. The spirit then took them to a time when Scrooge was somewhat older, and his sister came to take him home for a Merry Christmas. They continued their journey, and arrived at an office, where Scrooge recognized himself as a former employee. They witnessed the joyous celebrations of Scrooge's old employer, Mr. Fezziwig, who had generously given his staff a lively Christmas party. Finally, the first ghost showed Scrooge a scene from his past, where he was with a young girl who had once been in love with him. But she expressed her sorrow that Scrooge's love of wealth had changed him, and freed him from their engagement. The second spirit, the ghost of Christmas present, arrived on time, and Scrooge humbly asked the ghost to show him the way. They visited Bob Cratchit's home, where the Cratchit family, though poor, celebrated Christmas with love and joy. The Cratchits drank a toast to Scrooge, acknowledging his contribution to their meal and even wishing him a Merry Christmas. At the mention of Scrooge's name, their spirits were momentarily dampened, but they quickly returned to their cheerful celebrations. Scrooge was particularly touched by Tiny Tim, Bob's youngest son, who was ill and in need of special care. When he inquired about Tiny Tim's fate, the ghost cryptically hinted that the child's life might be in danger if nothing changed. Then Scrooge was taken to his nephew's house, where the family and friends were having a party. Fred, Scrooge's nephew, defended Scrooge and pitied his lonely life. He vowed to invite his uncle every Christmas in the hope that he would change. When they played a guessing game, and Fred hinted at an angry animal living in London, the answer unexpectedly turned out to be Uncle Scrooge. They all laughed heartily and proposed a toast to Scrooge, wishing him a happy Christmas and New Year. Scrooge met the third ghost, the ghost of Christmas yet to come, a silent and black figure. This ghost showed Scrooge a future he must face, and at first he overheard a group of men discussing a recent death, showing indifference and callousness. Later, Scrooge found himself in a dark, gloomy room with the body of a dead man covered by a sheet. He asked the ghost to show him a scene of people mourning the dead. The ghost showed him a family relieved that their moneylender was dead. Scrooge was then taken to Bob's house, where he found the Cratchit family mourning Tiny Tim's death in silence. Scrooge witnessed Bob's fond memories of his son, and the family's expressions of love for each other, despite their hardships. The spirit and Scrooge continued their journey and they arrived at a graveyard. Scrooge saw his own tombstone and begged the ghost for a chance to change his future, promising to be kind, to keep Christmas in his heart, and to be a good man. On Christmas morning, Scrooge awoke to find that he was back in his room, and that the events of the previous night were just a dream. Delighted to be alive and filled with a newfound spirit of generosity, Scrooge resolved to change his ways. Scrooge ran to the window and eagerly asked a boy in the street for the date, which turned out to be Christmas Day. Overjoyed that he hadn't missed the holiday, Scrooge sent the boy to buy a large turkey and deliver it to Bob Cratchit's house. In the street, Scrooge encountered the gentleman who had visited his office yesterday asking for donations for the poor. Scrooge apologized for his earlier rudeness and offered a generous contribution, promising to give more in the future. Scrooge then cheerfully joined the carol singers and generously donated money to them. Afterward, he surprised his nephew by joining him for Christmas dinner. The joyous celebration was filled with games, merriment, and a wonderful dinner. The next morning, Scrooge arrived at the office early and waited to see if Bob would be on time, but Bob was late. What Bob didn't expect was that instead of being angry, Scrooge wanted to give him a raise and do his best to help his family. Scrooge kept his promises and became a second father to Tiny Tim, a friend to all, and a generous employer. He continued to live a happy and fulfilled life. The story ended with Tiny Tim's famous and touching words, "God bless us, everyone."